Urgent, events on the front have erupted with our retaliation. The enemy stumbled at Pokrovsk. The first details of Putin's cunning plan. The AFU have ignited a catastrophe deep in the Russian rear. It's hard to believe. The Kremlin's oil artery has been cut. Defensive strength is collapsing before everyone's eyes, and the draft has not gone according to plan. There is neither the strength nor the means to launch assaults. Rams and sheep are being thrown into the fight. Putin is holding his head in his hands. Ukrainian drones are hovering right above his head. Technologies that make it impossible for Moscow to sit still. Propaganda has already sniffed everything out. A second front has been opened. All this in our episode of Hellpoint. Breaking news. The latest updates straight from the heart of the front line. The enemy has changed their plans. The breakthrough at Pokrovsk is postponed. Putin pointed his finger at the Pokrovsk-Dobropilya highway. But there's trouble here too. The enemy's new tactics have already been leaked to our side. Brutal. The Russians are trying to strike at our forces but run into fierce retaliation. These videos of their own defeat are something Putin's mercenaries would rather show to no one. Shocking. Now, instead of armored vehicles, there are sheep and rams. The occupiers are exploring new horizons while their commanders are selling them out to collaborators. Things are heating up near Zaporizhzhia. Don't miss everything about this coming up next.
The Russian army is loosening its grip. The offensive of the occupying forces in the Pokrovsk direction has somewhat slowed down. This is stated in the latest report from the Institute for the Study of War. However, analysts emphasize that this situation is temporary. Right now, the enemy is actively redeploying reserves and concentrating forces in this section of the front. And very soon, assaults and attacks may resume with renewed strength.
At the very least, somewhere. Up to half of the enemy's main forces are concentrated right here, strengthening the enemy. And that's despite the fact that things are no less difficult in other directions.
In recent days, the Russians have also made gains in the area of Mirnohrad, east of Pokrovsk. Russian military bloggers are talking about the capture of western Rivne and most of Chervony Lyman. There is evidence that the Russians are breaking through in advancing toward the Pokrovsk-Dobropilya highway in eastern Pokrovsk. However, our defenders are holding their positions.
The situation is changing because the enemy is being crushed there. In general, the main task of the Ukrainian defense forces is to inflict maximum losses on the enemy armies advancing toward Pokrovsk. As
some military observers claim, part of the territory of Pokrovsk has become a so-called gray zone. Control over it shifts from one side to the other. It
is more like a vinaigrette, if you will. Here it's red, here it's black, here it's white. And the situation in that region continues to change and evolve every single hour. However, despite these ongoing changes, the overall trend and direction still remain exactly the same as before. Approaching with the forces of the Second Army from the south and southwest, they couldn't advance in the city, so they waited until the 51st Army would encircle the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration from the north. Here, the 51st Army decided to bite off more than they could chew.
So now the occupiers are not trying to gain a foothold in Pokrovsk itself. The enemy wants to break through the city to its northern outskirts.
Serhiy Okashay, 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Ukrainian Air Assault Forces. Russian troops are somewhat slowing down their offensive operations in the Pokrovsk direction, waiting for reinforcements and trying to establish defenses and expand logistics to southern Pokrovsk.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, there have been at least 73 Russian assaults in the Pokrovsk direction over the past day. At this very moment, fighting is ongoing in Volodymyrivka, Fedorivka, Mykonorivka, Chervony Lyman, Orikov, and Filia. Unable to boast of any other achievements, the soldiers of the Kremlin's army resort to their favorite tactic, terror. For example, Russian drone operators have once again tried to destroy the Ukrainian flag in Kramatorsk. In other words, despite the Ukrainian armed forces in any way they can. But our flag turned out to be much nimbler than yet another Russian drone operator. As a result, frustrated by his failure, the occupier simply smashed his FPV drone into the ground. After watching a video like that, you can't help but wonder what kind of idiots are working there. The answer? Just the usual kind.
He just doesn't want to go at all. He's completely dug in.
Following horses and donkeys, the occupiers are now actively using sheep and rams at the front. It's worth noting that the Russian Ministry of Defense at least gives the animals body armor, which is a luxury many contract soldiers can't afford. However, even so, unlike Russians, the animals refuse to willingly go to slaughter.
Come on, go ahead. They're waiting for you right over there. That's it. Go on slowly, take your time. Come on. Combat unit, you can do it.
There is such a shortage of soldiers in the Russian army that they are putting not only sheep under arms, but also circus performers.
My backstory is that I was first an acrobat in the circus. Then after some unsuccessful falls, so to speak, I ended my career and was mobilized.
In the circus, a disabled person turned out to be of no use to anyone. But for meat assaults, he was a perfect fit. By the way, they gave the acrobat a team to match as his partners. So in our group, there was me,
The acrobat, a life safety teacher and regional studies expert, an altar boy, and a car doorman. And so with this kind of team, we probably live and...
All this, according to Putin, the second army in the world. Although, what's there to be surprised about with circus performers and sheep at the front if even the Russian generals themselves treat their own soldiers like cattle? They literally sell and trade them by weight. You see,
the Ministry of Defense recruits people, gives them dog tags, sends them to the troops, and then it turns out they don't exist. That's why they sell them. They never existed and don't exist.
In the Zaporizhzhia direction, commanders, without even trying to hide it, sell their refusers into forced labor to collaborators. Instead of legally processing refusals or sending them to disciplinary units, soldiers who do not want to take part in the meat grinder assaults are listed as missing, detained, and handed over for unpaid forced labor all across the Zaporizhzhia region. For this, Commandos receive substantial sums of money from the collaborators. Similar Russian refuseniks are already being found en masse at factories and construction sites in Melitopol and Berdyansk.
They're not even cannon fodder. They're not even serfs. They're just, I don't know, people sell chickens like that. And even then, people generally feel more sympathy for them.
Sensational. Ours hit the jackpot. The strikes by Ukraine's defense forces are piercing deep into the enemy's rear. Distances of over 2,000 kilometers are covered in no time. The drones did it. Russian oil refineries have already felt the power of our strikes. Ballistics are on standby. Flaming, in the literal sense of the word, is tearing through Russia. The video moments have spread across the internet. The Russians are whining there's no gasoline. The fuel crisis is becoming a wild beast, tightening its grip on one Russian region after another each day. Is the final blow already at stake? We'll find out in just a moment. Now,
Ukrainian armed forces attacks on Russian oil refineries are setting new records in both range and frequency.
We are striking legitimate targets. Oil extraction and refining make up 90% of the budget of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. In other words, these are dirty oil rubles that the enemy uses to kill us. If we look at September and October alone, that's 20 targets this year. Among them are 6 oil refineries, 2 oil terminals, 3 oil depots, and 9 oil pumping stations.
As of early November 2025, Ukraine has carried out 111 strikes on oil depots and refineries in Russia. For comparison, throughout all of 2024, there were 94 such incidents. As a result, Russia is facing enormous problems with oil refining volumes as well as shortages of fuel and gasoline on the domestic market.
What has this led to? This has resulted in a shortage of over 20% of petroleum products on the domestic market, the shutdown of 37% of oil refining capacities, and a shortage of these petroleum products in 57 regions of the Russian Federation, as well as a ban on gasoline exports until the end of this year.
Federal Highway M12, Moscow, Kazan. A toll road, gas stations, just one station every 150 kilometers. At each gas station, there are lines of cars stretching for 1.5 to 2 kilometers, all waiting to refuel. I'll show you what this looks like now, and when it will be refueled with the previous supplies is unclear. I counted 130 cars ahead of us.
But it's not just about the quantity, it's also about the quality. The range at which Russian oil refineries can be hit has almost doubled. If last year the farthest target was the Salavat oil refinery in Bashkortostan, about 1,300 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, on October 6, 2025, Ukrainian drones reached the Tyumen oil refinery, more than 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. According to calculations by journalists from the publication Verstka, the effectiveness of Ukrainian drone strikes is 85%. 85%. Out of 250 strikes since the beginning of the full-scale war, 213 have been successful. Many facilities, especially in southern Russia, are being attacked repeatedly. For example, the Ryazan, Volgograd and Ilsky oil refineries have each been attacked 10.
In these challenging and difficult times, to truly turn the situation around, it's absolutely necessary not only to learn and understand how to effectively repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and aviation. That is why it is absolutely necessary to strike at key enterprises of Russia's military-industrial complex and its energy system.
During the war, Ukraine first launched from scratch and then significantly ramped up the production of long-range and strike drones. Russian oil refineries are being terrorized by the Aluty, Palyanitsia, Peklo and FP-1 UAVs. Drones costing just a few $1,000s are causing damage to the Russian budget worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Here, guys. It's burning.
The 7th hit. Yes. This is the 7th drone that is currently coming in right now.
At the same time, following the drones, Ukraine is ramping up the production of long-range missiles. According to experts, if Ukraine uses cruise missiles like the Flamingo with a range of 3,000 kilometers and a 1,000 kilogram warhead, there will be nothing left of the Russian oil refineries. If
the strike hits the oil refinery, it will be impossible to restore that refinery. That is, if before, when a drone hit, it was generally possible to replace the damaged components within just a few weeks or perhaps about a month, which was considered manageable. With spare parts, in this case, everything will be completely destroyed down to the roots. The entire rectification column will be completely destroyed. And after 2 pairs of such missiles, all that will remain of the refinery will be memories.
the trend is that there will be more and more strikes, while Russia will have less and less gasoline and other fuel.
Urgently, the main pillar of Putin's defense industry has collapsed. It seems the Russian military machine is living out its final days. In the Kremlin, they just throw up their hands. And right at this moment, the giants that supplied the army with armored vehicles are putting their non-stop work on pause. The tank fleet has vanished. It looks like they'll have to fight with their bare hands. The collapse of the economy and with it the downfall of Putin's dreams. Russians are shocked. The irreversible process has begun. Tomorrow could be even worse. Don't miss everything about this.
We must not only keep pace with the ever-evolving and rapidly changing global economy, but also strive to consistently outpace its complex and shifting dynamics by unlocking and realizing our own unique potential.
But in Russia, there is no sign of any dynamics or potential. In particular, even the most resilient are starting to collapse. For example, the Russian military giant Uralvagonzavod, which produces armored vehicles and enjoys all the privileges of the military-industrial complex, can't withstand the pressure. It's coming apart at the seams.
So what is the plant's management doing? They don't formally lay people off, but instead switch them to a 4-day work week with a 20% pay cut, or a 3-day work week with a 40% pay cut. This is exactly what's happening right now. But even that is no longer helping. And this was the stage we reached.
But even reducing shifts to a minimum no longer works. At the Enterprise, that is the flagship of Russian tank manufacturing, layoffs are coming. This was reported by the Russian publication E-1. In some departments, up to 50% of the staff is planned to be cut. But across the entire enterprise, every 10th employee will be left without a job.
Previously, the civilian production might not have been very profitable. There was a lot of money for military needs, and that somehow made up for it. But now it seems even spending on military production is being cut. And it seems that the revenue and profits from military production can't cover the losses in the civilian sector. That's why now they're going to cut people from civilian production, about 10% they say.
Experts explain that the reason for all this is the incredible decline of the Russian economy. Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries which deprive Russia of millions in petrodollars, Western sanctions and increased pressure from the US on the Russian oil sector have already led to a situation where even the negative forecasts for the economy are inaccurate. Everything is going to get even worse.
Their negative forecast from the central bank, let me remind you, is a 2.5 to 3.5% drop in GDP, 12% inflation, and an interest rate of 20%. That is, they will have to raise the rate to 20% next year, and that's their negative forecast. The scenario that I consider not negative, but rather what actually exists in reality right now, that's the point. The thing is, the accumulated problems just keep surfacing every day, and they don't allow them to maintain the scenario that the central bank considers controllable.
The situation has escalated to the point where the decline of the Russian economy has to be acknowledged publicly.
Question. Is that enough? Is this what we wanted?
In fact, even according to official data, recession has already affected 19 out of 24 sectors of the Russian economy. Moreover, they're even starting to have problems with their defense sector, with military-industrial enterprises. If these enterprises are already experiencing non-payments, meaning they're not being paid from the budget and are having to reduce working hours and work weeks, for example, like Electro-Atrals in the wagon factory, this means their funding was cut about 3 months ago. So these processes are really happening.
At the same time, the most interesting thing is that in Russia, they've already figured out how to present this information to the higher-ups. Everything follows the pattern of negative growth and unsuccessful successes. So now they're openly talking about the economic downturn. At the same time, they add that there was such unprecedented growth before, it simply couldn't last forever. So now we are witnessing
a decline is a reduction or decrease in the level, amount, or quality of something over a period of time. This term is often used to describe negative trends in areas such as the economy, population, or the condition of resources, and it can raise concerns when observed.
The solution suggested itself to once again revise the budget project, of course in the direction of its negative growth.
A look at the general outlines and structure of the country's main financial document, which is its key priority.
And the priority, as before, remains the war. So they advise not to expect any improvement in analytics. And if the cuts have already affected the industrial giants of the defense industry, all enterprises in the country are next in line, including private ones.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Finally, this is being spoken about openly. A large-scale mobilization has been announced in Russia. The situation has gone far beyond the Kremlin's plan. The reserves are almost exhausted. Putin is in agony, searching for streams of soldiers for the front. The Russians themselves are resisting as best they can. Every other person has no desire to return home in a body bag. In shock, Moscow is nervously overhauling its strategy. Urgent calls for volunteers are appearing along with heightened security measures for key facilities. The system has been shaken and now the Kremlin is trying to patch the holes as the situation escalates. Will the autumn-winter draft end up swallowing Putin himself? We'll talk about this in just a moment. The cannon fodder conveyor. Putin has signed a law introducing year-round conscription into the Russian army.
We feel confident, secure and stable, and despite certain inevitable costs, which of course will naturally be associated with many different things in life, we remain assured.
The new law allows military enlistment offices to operate without breaks, and dodging service will become even harder.
Well done.
Victory will be ours.
Absolutely. Victory will be ours.
But this optimistic and hopeful mood will very soon leave these brave heroes.
Never go to this special military operation. You'll get caught. The number of people we've lost, it's just...
And we'll lose even more because Putin is doing everything to make that happen. According to the new procedure, recruitment into the army will take place throughout the entire year, from January 1st to December 31st.
And not just during the spring and autumn drafts, but also at other times throughout the year when important decisions and preparations are made. Maintaining consistent attention and effort is essential beyond those well-known periods. The so-called special military operation.
According to the new rules, draft notices can now be posted in the state electronic register, and the deadline to report to the military enlistment office must not exceed 30 days from the moment the notice is published.
These measures are already being implemented across the territory of the Russian Federation, and they have primarily affected citizens of the Central Asian republics. In addition, we should note that this decree will lead to
Putin signed another law that allows reservists to be involved in guarding critically important infrastructure facilities. Russian media note that this is about strengthening control over military and
apparently they will be sent directly to the front line of combat contact. In other words, strategic facilities will now be protected right at the zero line.
Simply put, Putin's new rules essentially legalize year-round raids and constant pressure on conscripts. And while the Kremlin dictator makes decisions from his warm office and tells stories about how Russians are supposedly lining up voluntarily to go fight,
Our guys, on the other hand, go voluntarily. They go of their own free will. Here we have 50 to 60,000 guys coming on their own every month.
On the front lines, Russian soldiers cursed the day they enlisted. Some were lured by money but ended up with nothing. Others were simply deceived and thrown in as cannon fodder.
My head got screwed on straight a lot faster. It only took me about 3 or 4 months to fully grasp the reality of the situation. I'd rather get caught and go to prison than go back there.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the aggressor country Russia has lost about 1.5 million soldiers. Since the beginning
of 2025, 336,000 citizens of the Russian Federation have signed contracts with the Russian Federation's armed forces. And now, attention to the assessments of British intelligence regarding the losses of the Russian occupiers. From January to November, they maintained 353,000 military personnel. In other words, the losses of the Russian army are much greater than their ability to replenish their personnel. That is, it's a matter of addressing these issues. Restoring and replenishing military personnel through volunteers, even with financial incentives, and most of these volunteers are residents of Russia's economically depressed regions, does not truly solve the problem of replenishing their ranks.
No matter how many soldiers the Kremlin sends to Ukraine, only defeat and death await them here. And the Russian ruler understands this perfectly well. But he doesn't care. Right now, there is panic in the enemy's command centers. A new generation of Ukrainian drones has appeared on the battlefield. Their debut was a signal. Hard times have come for the Kremlin. This is a revolution in warfare. The old Mavics are becoming history because these birds operate with surgical precision, destroying everything they see. After the first strikes, the enemy is literally stunned. Ukrainian engineering ingenuity is turning the front upside down. Will this be the turning point of the war? The answer is in the story in just a few minutes.
Intelligence. Adjusting the fire to hit the target by dumping ammunition. Is the Chinese Mavic drone the main weapon of the armed forces of Ukraine in the war against the occupier? And now Ukrainian industry has started supplying domestically produced UAVs of the Mavic type to the front lines.
Mr. X personally invested and created the Ukrainian Mavic, and we will see it soon. They say the first 1,000 have already been delivered to the battlefield.
Compared to the Chinese Mavic, the Ukrainian counterpart has a greater flight range and can carry a heavier payload. It is used both for reconnaissance and strike missions. The importance of Ukrainian drones appearing in this niche is hard to overestimate because supplying Mavics to Ukraine faces enormous problems.
DJI has banned sales to Ukraine, piously declaring that its products are not intended for military purposes, so drones have to be purchased from third parties. The security issues are obvious. The Pentagon has banned any use of DJI drones which send data back to the manufacturers. DJI has also added security features that make it impossible for the latest models to fly in geo-blocked zones, including Ukraine, without extensive hacking. Ultimately, sovereign drone production is a key strategic capability. In the future,
the Ukrainian analog of the Chinese Mavic drone is called Shmavic, and despite its ironic name, it has already been certified and comes with some serious features.
Shmavic is positioned as a tactical reconnaissance drone designed to carry out operational tasks on the front lines, unlike the civilian Mavic, which is mainly used for aerial photography and videography. Shmavic is built for combat conditions. It has a range of up to 15 kilometers, a flight duration of up to 60 minutes, and is equipped with a reliable navigation system that is resistant to interference.
As early as last year, the government announced its interest in replacing Chinese drones. At present, manufacturers have already completed certification of Ukrainian Mavics and have set up production.
As of today, it is impossible to fully replace the fleet of Mavics currently operating in Ukraine in the short term. Our weapons engineers are already working on designs that meet the requirements of our special services. Now it is necessary to scale up this production and minimize the number of foreign analogs as much as possible, transitioning to domestic models.
There are already numerous Ukrainian analogs of the Mavic, including Ukreporter, Yaetia, and the magical Shmavic. They are larger than Mavic drones, equipped with long-range jammers, and are more expensive. However, they may turn out to be more economical due to their greater reliability.
For us, the key indicator is not the price per drone, but the cost of a single mission. While a typical Mavic performs about 60 missions per drone, our systems on average complete around 300 missions per unit. With a comparable purchase price, the cost of a single mission is 5 times lower. And this means that the military units operating our drones gain a much greater overall economic benefit. Drone manufacturer.
Independent UAV production is the most important element in modern warfare. And Ukraine knows this better than anyone. Since short-range drones and long-range strike UAVs have become the most crucial elements of national defense.
Urgent news. There is a real explosion from within in Russia. Putin is afraid of his own heroes who have just returned from the so-called special military operation. An urgent order has been issued to purge the contract soldiers and restore discipline. Footage is appearing online from the very heart of Russia. Chaos, panic, and mutual betrayal. The realities of life in the Russian Federation are now different. Propaganda has been ordered to stay silent. The topic of the army is now forbidden. Tension is rising in Moscow, and a wave of protests has swept across the region. People are taking to the streets, fear is turning into anger. The situation is on the edge, and anything could happen next. All the details about this, don't miss the upcoming report.
What could be more frightening for Russians than sending their own son or husband to the front in Ukraine? That's right, if he comes back from there...
In St. Petersburg, a man who returned from the war is terrorizing his apartment building, threatening his neighbors, and throwing some kind of imitation grenade from the balcony.
Few people want to live on the same street, or worse, in the same building with these so-called heroes of the special military operation. As a rule, these newly minted veterans were already notorious outcasts before the war, and after returning from the front, they've completely lost all restraint. Theft, murdering their own drinking buddies, rape and robbery have become everyday occurrences in the peaceful lives of Russian special military operation veterans. There is
such a popular saying among us. There's really no effective defense against a crowbar, except perhaps using another crowbar to counter it.
For Russian ex-convicts, drug addicts and psychopaths returning from the war, that other crowbar will be another crowbar. How can I put this more gently? The story with the sledgehammer. It's hard to believe, but Russian propagandists are increasingly openly talking about the killing or zeroing out of their own soldiers. Bloggers insist that there is no place for participants of the special military operation in civilian life. The state isn't even considering bringing them back and helping them adapt to peaceful life.
All these people who have received weapons and gone through the war have a very significant and serious criminal future. Something needs to be done with them.
Moreover, those returning from the war are far from the best of the best. The new Putin military elite, as the man in the bunker calls it, is made up entirely of ex-convicts who were granted amnesty.
I would really like to gaze directly into the eyes of the person who made the decision to use prisoners in combat operations, because this is a time bomb.
And it will explode inside Russia itself.
Or maybe they're just idiots. A significant portion of our current contingent already consists of people who, while serving time or under investigation, sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense. So they either avoid punishment from the court or they get out of camps, out of prisons, and get the opportunity, as they say, to atone for their guilt with blood, but in reality, they just get an opportunity to kill while at large, and possibly, if circumstances turn out favorably, then later go free, fully pardoned, maybe even with awards and so on.
The solution that the Kremlin found is both ingenious and cruel at the same time. There are rumors that Putin simply ordered that no one should return alive from the front. Putin wants to send the convicts loyal to the authorities to Africa. As for the rest, following the good old Wagner PMC tradition, they'll be disposed of.
The first option is to send them somewhere in Africa. The second option is that, well, let's put it mildly, there'll be the story with the sledgehammer.
At the same time, it's worth noting that such a proposal, which is increasingly voiced by Kremlin propagandists, seems to have received tacit approval from the Russian population as well.
Because this is Russian Nazism. They get a thrill from death. That's the only thing that really excites them.
A full-scale campaign against Russian contract soldiers who have returned from the so-called special military operation is also being waged on Russian federal channels. There, around the clock, 24/7, they keep persuading people to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. But when it comes to the death toll at the front, the Kremlin has ordered everyone to keep silent. That's how Russian propagandists operate. They cut from the broadcast a part of Putin's conversation with an 11-year-old girl who asked the president to bring her uncle back from the war.
Well, now we're heading to the front. He was wounded in the arm. He was in the hospital. He isn't being treated at all. Now they're sending him out on a mission. I would like him to be transferred to a good hospital in Russia.
Russian propaganda has received the command to go ahead. The Kremlin's mouthpieces have been tasked with turning on their own soldiers.
Just go and make sure you don't get beaten.
It seems Putin is tired of playing war with old toy soldiers, so the bunker dweller ordered to get rid of them.
Weakness is unacceptable because it creates temptation, the illusion that some issue can be resolved with us.
Endless video appeals from grief-stricken Russian mothers desperately trying to find their children who went missing at the front, pleas for help from wounded and abandoned contract soldiers left without medicine or medical care, and complaints from mobilized troops about the unbearable conditions. The unbearable conditions of service in the Russian army seem to have finally gotten to Vladimir Vladimirovich. But instead of solving the problem, the bunker dweller prefers to simply ignore it. And he has ordered Russian propagandists to stop any discussion about the troubles in the Russian army.
Just don't. It's really and honestly simply absurd.
Putin only needs soldiers on the battlefield. Outside of it, all these people become a threat to the Kremlin. Unprincipled. And those who are skilled with weapons can cause the regime significant problems.
What do I want to say? The guys working in the swamps record everything clearly and hide nothing. There will be an order in place. Only in the most extreme case should you return home. Only in the most extreme case. And even then, only if, in other words, the order is to spread out to all possible breathing places.
Those individuals who refuse to spread out or disperse when asked will ultimately be eliminated from the group.
That's all from me. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more hellish news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, subscribe and leave a like. See you.